Welcome back, everyone. Recently, there have been a number of people kind of asking for my take on all that's going on with Uranium Participation Corp, and so I figured here's an update. Right, so there's been a number of things that have sort of been happening recently, and they seem to all be revolving around Uranium Participation Corp. And so the main things I'm going to talk about today are the Sprott Takeover, the conversion to units and listing, and the raise that happened yesterday. So the first thing is Sprott is taking over the hosting, I guess you could say, from Denison. And so they're paying the break fee and some of the fees associated with getting out of the old agreement and getting into the new one, where they should be in charge of the units and of brokering deals, I guess, and the transactions in uranium. The important thing to know is that the takeover alone and the conversion from regular corporation to units or whatever, that doesn't mean anything alone. However, the idea behind doing this is to bring in not only brand recognition, but a lower cost of capital. And I'll get to more about that in a second, but basically to ease the transition between shares and market purchases or sales. So in theory, with Sprott at the helm, they should be able to have access to cheaper money, potentially via an ATM at the market, like many other vehicles have out there. So an ATM basically would be able to sell shares in the market at the current price and buy uranium, presuming that there's access to uranium, that there's an offer that's lower than the price because there's an arbitrage opportunity. Simple enough. The question becomes, is there enough liquidity? Is there enough volume traded on the stock to end in the spot market? But that's an entirely different question. But for now, let's focus on, is there enough volume? Are there enough shares traded so that in one day they could sell enough shares without moving the market to buy, let's call it 100,000 pounds of uranium? Well, that's the question. And so for now, I think liquidity still needs to be higher. I mean, don't get me wrong, the liquidity of that company, fund, ETN, whatever you want to call it, is higher than the spot market. However, it's still not high. It trades like $2 or $3 million Canadian per day, which is in stock world very little. And so if it can get the volume, this could be a big change in the market. But remember, this already trades, and there's already Yellowcake, which trades also. But while this and Yellowcake trade, both foreign and over the counter, I mean, well, saying Yellowcake trades over the counter is probably a bit of a stretch. There is access to this at many brokers. So the question becomes, will they do a US listing? Probably. How much will that help? Well, probably won't help many diehards who probably either already are in the equities or Participation Corp at a broker that accepts it, which is most of them, or in a foreign currency. That's also possible. But when we're talking about liquidity, some people have kind of asked me to clarify this. So liquidity is how many shares trade daily, because let's say everyone that's in the stock buys one day, sells one day, 3 years later. Well, then day to day it doesn't trade a lot. And versus if everyone's a day trader, day trading the thing, then a lot of shares will trade daily. And this matters only because let's say you're the company and you need to squeeze in I don't know, $10 million. Can you do that in a day? Well, right now, no. If they get more liquidity, if more shares trade, and you can kind of add shares without moving the price as much, well, then it's more significant. Now, I think it's important to think about what would it mean if Uranium Participation Corp became the Sprott Market. Not my joke, someone else's. But basically, it could become the price setter, assuming that anytime it was above NAV, it would create units and buy more uranium, versus if it was below NAV, it would sell uranium and buy back units. The problem here, or the thing to note, at least if it's not a problem, is that it adds a lot of market risk and correlation and sentiment and all that type of risk to the physical market. And remember what can happen, because we've seen it. We've seen how inelastic the buying could be. So just late last year, Uranium Participation Corp was trading at a large discount to NAV. That would mean it would be dumping uranium on the market. Who's going to buy it then? Think back to what happened last year. What things were going on? No one was buying. No one was selling, because it's a small market. So my point being that this is dangerous in both directions. So not only can the market squeeze the physical market, but it can break the physical market in the other direction also, because it would I guess it could just drive down the price to the point where there's, it could set the price downwards also. Then, yesterday, it was announced that, presumably in its old form, Uranium Participation Corp would be raising $50 million Canadian to buy pounds of uranium. Finally. So the thing is, again, this isn't a ton of uranium, and will it be upsized? Maybe. We'll see. But as is, even with a conversion, 81 cents, it's about 40 million US. It's about 1.3 million pounds-ish. It's something. It's not much. And ASX stocks seem to really like it. So, that's good. But I think this raise kind of just demonstrates the issues and why, if you look at all the other things that I spoke about, why it could be very helpful. Okay, because let's go through the raise. They announced the raise. It was at a 5.5% discount to market, 5.5%. That's not bad. It's not great. It's not bad. It will take time to close, and meanwhile, you're letting the market know, okay, we're about to buy. We're about to buy 1 million pounds. And there's still fees to pay. So it would be probably, better, more ideal if you had an at the market, and just someday where it was trading at a premium, you put the shares in same day, lift the offer and buy the pounds, and that's it. So hopefully it can transition into a market or a system that is more efficient, quicker, and better. So to summarize what I believe are the most critical points in what I've covered, this change still needs to prove that it can get the liquidity. And I think it will, and I think it will become a more dominant pricing mechanism, but I don't think it'll happen all at once immediately. I think it's kind of will be a growth thing and will happen. But I also think that this increases the correlation to a whole bunch of other things. I think that over time you're going to see the price of uranium, because if this does happen, I think it's going to become increasingly seemingly correlated to things it shouldn't be. Because we know what the demand for nuclear will be. We know what the supply will be in the shorter term at least. So the price shouldn't move that daily, but once you tie it into something that trades on the market, things on the market move for all sorts of reasons, and it could take hold of the thesis at certain times and cause, this only matters because it could cause uranium to kind of splash around the market. Would be interesting. On the raise, I'm not expecting fireworks from a $50 million Canadian raise. Again, they can buy from December, they could buy at any point on the curve because they don't need it tomorrow, and I doubt they're going to throw themselves in front of the price to push up the price potentially temporarily again. It wouldn't make sense to be the one to pump up the price. They want to buy as cheaply as possible, as do all the buyers, so they can buy from anywhere. I also think that there's tremendous irony in this situation for a number of reasons, really. Because if you think about it, the less uranium that is actually available, and bulls will say very little, then the less relevant this would be. And the other thing is, later, this becomes as much of a risk as it is potentially an accelerant in the shorter term. And lastly, when you think about it, tremendous, people will say there's tremendous risk reward here because the market is inefficient, and that's, what can make it very, very cyclical, and it can. But this mechanism is optimistically, or if it works and if it becomes relevant, well, it's making the market more efficient. So in theory, could be good, but could also be, bad. It may overshoot less, or it may not happen next time, or something like that. So it's all a question of what's your time frame, what's your expectations, and what is good. And in a bit of a out there, hold the presses moment, this video was almost uploaded, but I canceled it because I just saw Denison just submitted a bid to buy JCU, the exploration arm that it looked like UEX Corp was going to buy. So the bid, for me, from Denison looks far better than UEX's bid. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know how this is going to go. It seems to me like it would make a lot of sense if Denison won the bid, but it just looks like we may have a bit of a bidding war, which probably not. I mean, obviously, if the companies want to buy it, then it's good for them, but probably not good for those involved. Now, not saying that that'll hit the share price because it was a really good deal before. Denison has the cheaper cost of capital, perhaps, in that they're a bigger company, so it's they can make the acquisition a bit less dilutive. But what's at stake here is basically the remaining 10% in Wheeler River, about 30% in Cameco's Millennium, and about 34% in Orano's Kiyevik deposits. So there are a number of assets here. So it will be interesting to see how this goes. I just figured I'd tack this on because video hadn't technically finished, and this is another interesting event. In conclusion, this has the potential, particularly the Sprott takeover, to be impactful a few steps down the line. But like everything, I don't think it's going to show up with big fireworks tomorrow. I think it's going to be gradual, and you may not even know that it's happening or notice it in the short to medium term. So as long as expectations are in check, you're not expecting fireworks tomorrow, stocks going to the moon this, this week, expectations in check, but it's a step forward in the thesis medium term. And with that, I want to wish everyone a great day. Thanks for watching, and until next time, catch you later.